No, the stories are really interesting. I'm excited to hear yours too.
Hey, speeding?
No speeding.
Okay. Did you attend a public or private school?
I attended, you mean high school? I attended a, uh,
Yeah. Prior
a
to Princeton.
public high school prior to Princeton, Roosevelt High School, which is in Boyle Heights in East LA. It's predominantly Mexican American today, and when I was there in class of '88. So yeah, it's funny. My couple of my roommates here at Princeton, when I got here, when they saw my yearbook from Roosevelt, uh, they were shocked that everybody in there was brown. That was Mexican or a couple of black people, one Asian. But yeah, but it was a public school.
Okay. Also, can you please say your name and your class year and then spell it?
Okay. My name is Irma Martinez, class of 1992, IRMA, last name Martinez, Martinez.
Great. And how did you prepare for Princeton both socially and intellectually?
Um, Intellectually, I think what happened was that how I prepared for Princeton was not really sort of a conscious thing, but I had been bused to a magnet school in Los Angeles. It was a public school. So the school was so good, and that Andover went to recruit at our junior high school. So our academics are really good there. So that gave me a grounding for Princeton. Um, but and then from there on, then I went on to Roosevelt, which was my home school, and by then I was taking as a sophomore I was taking classes with juniors and seniors, and I remember even, for example, my French class. I went in and I said, "Oh, I'm in this class, Professor, I forget his name." It was, I don't know, French 3 or 4, and he noticed that I was a sophomore, and he's like, "You're in the wrong class," and I said, "No, I'm not." So I was in the right class, and but so that's kind of, I think, how I prepared. Like I said, it wasn't a conscious thing. It was just a matter of teachers telling my mom, "Hey, you should really, perhaps she should go to a magnet school, a little bit more rigorous." And then socially, I don't think I really prepared for that part. I don't think I was really aware of how different it would be. I was really only focused on coming to the East Coast because, like I had mentioned before, Andover had come to recruit at my junior high school, and I just loved the way it looked, which is kind of a little bit. It's similar to Princeton, I believe, although I've still never been to Andover, but. But yeah, I was naturally a social person, but when I got here, I think initially I wasn't. Um, Oddly enough, just this morning, a couple of women came up to me asking me some, reunions related question, and I didn't have my name on, and she said, "Oh, it's Irma, right?" And she remembered me because I had been part of a band at Princeton. It was a salsa band, and so she remembered me from then. So maybe that's how was social here. By being part of this band, I was a singer. Other things that I did, but I think in terms of like generally the class, my classmates in general. Uh, yeah, we didn't really click at that time. I think there was immaturity both on my part and maybe some of the kids that didn't grow up with people like me, which now, I've made so many friends coming back to reunions, and we wonder, like, why didn't we talk when we were, 18, 19, 20? But yeah.
And why did you go to Princeton?
Why did I go to Princeton? I think it's a little bit like I said about the Andover, where I was, the school went to recruit my junior high. I wanted to come east. I told my mom, "Hey, I would like to apply to Andover and for high school," and she's like, "Are you crazy? No way." So, but the sort of, the seed was planted. From that point forward, I kind of imagined that I'd come to the East Coast. and also two kids in my high school that were ahead of me. One of them was class of 90, Amparo Gonzalez, and from Princeton class of 90, and then Jerry Alvarez, Princeton class of 91. They also came to Princeton from Roosevelt, so I was aware of them. Obviously, in junior high, I didn't know about necessarily Princeton. I just thought East Coast. But then what really sealed the deal was visiting. My senior year in high school, I visited UPenn, and then I took the train. It was my first trip on to the East Coast. My second trip on a plane. Came to Philadelphia and then came out here, and like I said, some of the kids from my high school, and just knowing generally that it was a great school, that's kind of what sealed the deal.
Okay. And what were your expectations coming in, and did Princeton live up to them?
My expectations coming in, I don't know that I had, like I said, any concrete expectations. Like I know some of my classmates, they had to check with their parents about what classes to take. There's like a plan for them. The only plan I had was to graduate and to get out so that I could, be better off than my parents. My parents are immigrants. We lived in a not so great part of town in LA. And I was just really curious, and, I was excited to come here. So it was just to get out of where I lived and get a degree. And did Princeton meet them? Sure it did. I don't think a lot of the things I went through I expected. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. But now, with the passage of time and being older, and it was an amazing experience. And now, I feel like I'm part of Princeton.
Okay. Irma, what were your initial impressions of Princeton?
My initial impressions of Princeton, well, I think a lot of it has to do with the people that I met. I think initially, honestly, I felt like people were really kind of cold. I always commented, especially I feel like I talked a lot to the African American kids and the Latinos. Some of them, because I think some of them were like from Texas or from other parts that I didn't relate. I related more to like inner city kids. My buddy from Queens, Paul Roldan. So, I was used to kind of walking somewhere, and if I came across someone, we would at least make eye contact or nod or something. And white people generally, when we were here, they wouldn't. Like, it was like, that was kind of a little bit like, I remember being kind of sad about it, or like confused, like what's going on, so that was surprising. But other things were very cool. Like, they were different, like being so cold, having to take public transportation. Like, to me, those things were neat, were like something different. I was pretty self-sufficient. Oh my God, I remember when I got here, American Express had like a little, I don't know what it was, but I got my first credit card here. So I learned how to get into debt here. That wasn't a good thing. But also, I had fun also going up eventually, not initially, but my senior year, going up to New York and going shopping and things like that. I'm a shopper. What can I say?
Did you feel like you fit in when you arrived to Princeton?
Did I feel like I fit in? Absolutely not. Like, no. But I was stubborn. Like, actually, my freshman year, there was a John Templeton. He was was in the admissions office, and then he went on to become, I believe, the dean of admissions at the public policy school. Amazing human being. A lot of us Latino and African American and Asian students really, he was very supportive. But he said that I was resilient, and at the time that he told me that I was resilient, I didn't know what the word meant, and so I plugged through, and I did meet some amazing people that I connected with, and I still have a relationship, like Paul Roldan from Queens, and like Alice Rivera. She's from Puerto Rico. We met even before formal classes started. We had this program called the FSOP, Freshman Summer Orientation Program. So I met a lot of those classmates then. So they helped, me get through things, and just my, I think my natural curiosity and being outgoing. Although again, I think it was really stunted initially, but I think that's what helped me through. So yeah, I that's it.
Thank you.
I actually forgot the question
No,
at the end.
it's fine. You said it at the beginning.
No, I know, but
Did you feel like you fit in?
oh yeah.
Yeah. No worries. What was your major, and were there many other Latino students within that major, and did that play any role in your choice?
Just real quick, in terms of whether I fit in, I just want to add that by the time I graduated, which by the way was not in my initial class, I was originally class of 92, I graduated in 1994. But by the time I graduated, I remember my last semester after I had turned in my thesis and walking kind of actually right in front of this building in Pine, and then looking towards Firestone. I was so happy, and I felt like I made it, like I fit in. I'm a Princetonian, So I think that's why we're here. All of us who come, I think, to reunions, we ultimately feel like a Princetonian, and that we do fit in. I learned through the course of my time here that everybody had challenges, even people with a lot of money, white people, a lot of times people who grow up poor think, oh, people with money, of course, that's silly, but when you're 18, 19, 20, sometimes you don't get it. But yeah, so eventually, no, I didn't feel like I fit in at the beginning, but eventually I think I found my own space. In terms of my major, I had declared history as my major initially, but I had started taking Spanish classes. I grew up speaking Spanish. That was my first language. When I got to kindergarten, I didn't speak English. I remember being very afraid to go to kindergarten because my teacher didn't speak Spanish. I was always jealous of my sister, whose kindergarten teacher was a Spanish speaker, and my sister actually studied Spanish in kindergarten. And to this day, I think her Spanish is better than mine, and even though she never studied it beyond, I believe, kindergarten. But when I got here, and I took French through junior high and high school. But when I got here, there's a lot of international students. There's the kids from Puerto Rico. They're Spanish. That's it's their first language. I realized my Spanish was not that great. I had thought my Spanish was great, was good. It was actually pretty good for someone who's born here and who didn't study it. But so I did take courses, and I liked. Like I remember taking a course where I had to read Miguel de Cervantes, and I just thought, who obviously wrote Don Quixote, there's a lot of funny passages in Don Quixote, but there were these novelas ejemplares, which are kind of like small stories that Cervantes did, and I believe they were before El Quixote. Very funny. Like I remember just being in my room and laughing. And I just thought, wow, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but like I have something in common with some guy that lived like 500 years ago. It was like crazy. So, and in history, I was having like, not problems, but it's such a huge department, and I hadn't clicked with any professor. And that was not like a bad thing on the professor. I think it was more me again, still kind of not coming into my own, being out there. So, but with I had connected with a couple of people, professors here in the Romance Languages department. So I ended up declaring Spanish as my major. which back then was Romance languages. And my goal had been to keep studying French, which I studied a couple semesters. But honestly, the kids that took French, they were just so fluent, and I just was like, oh my God, I just, no. So I stuck with the Spanish. And yeah, and that's what I did. I met some great people. Andy Bell, who I believe started with me in my class as well, also a Spanish major. He was amazing. He was one of my best friends here. And there were other Latinos who declared Spanish or Romance languages as their major. I'm kind of drawing a blank, but I know there were a couple more. And I know that because I remember in my insecurity thinking, oh, it's kind of weird that I'm doing Spanish. But then also I would tell myself, well, hello, there's plenty of English majors. So it's actually not that, it's not, but I think most people are like, well, you're right in Spanish, that's weird. But yeah, and actually when I got out of here, when I graduated, I shouldn't say got out of here, it sounds like a prison sentence. But I ended up going to DC and working there for a while, and my Spanish was so good. Like, people couldn't figure out where I was from. Like, are you Colombian? Are you, because also, I guess my accent was, just, you can tell. Because generally, I can tell, like, if there's a Mexican, like, just yesterday, I passed in front of Nassau Hall, and the young man asked me, and I overheard him talking to his friends, and then he asked me to take his picture. And I said, you're from Mexico, right? And he was, because you can tell people from Argentina. But here, my Spanish was kind of, just sort of generic, good Spanish. No, it's not so good because you have to practice it every day. But I still practice it. I actually am an attorney in LA, and a lot of my clients are Spanish speakers, so it's come in handy.
Great. Thank you. Did you take any courses that touched on Latino-related issues?
Latino-related issues courses. I remember there was this course. It just kind of pops up. It was a politics course, the theory of transformation. I believe something along those lines. And I don't recall exactly whether we studied Latino issues, but the professor, I believe Professor Avalos, he was not he was visiting professor, and he was Latino. But it was about sort of transformational, I think, politics, I guess, movements, but also I realized it's also people, right? So to me, that was a real opportunity to kind of understand sort of what I was going through, like this amazing new experience that now has become my own, and therefore, yes, it was, to me, it's been transformational. And I recall, because for classes here, you would have the main lecture, obviously, and then you'd have these precepts, right? So my precept director or leader, my preceptor, she was a politics PhD. I believe she was from New York, but she and I hit it off, and it was one of the classes where I got an A, and she kind of explained to me that, like, not every student understood the concepts that were being discussed, and I think for me, it sort of was a natural thing, So, and other Latino issues, I think we took there was a Chicano novel class, I believe, that I took, and I know Mario Vargas Llosa, who was a Peruvian writer. He was a visiting professor one time, so not really Latino issues, but Latino centric. I don't know. So, but yeah, there weren't tons of opportunities for it, but yeah, I feel like there were a couple instances where I did take advantage of that.
Okay. Irma, did you think that professors had a different reaction towards Latino or minority students while you were at Princeton?
Did I think if whether professors had a different reaction towards Latino or minority students? I think yes and no. So, for example, on the positive side, there was this politics professor that I had, Colburn, I think was his last name. I'm not quite remember exactly his name, but so he was a big fan of our salsa band. He would show up to all our shows, and so he had. I kind of feel like it's not a bias, but he had like a natural kind of liking. He taught Latin American politics. I believe that's the course. So there's an affinity there. So I feel like he liked us, like we were, he saw a Latino in his class, and I think he kind of perked up. That was my feeling. In terms of negative, not, I never felt it sort of direct, but one thing I will say is that, I mentioned earlier that I didn't graduate with my class. So my junior year, I had already declared Spanish as my major. And I won't say what class, but basically there was a class that I started getting, it had kind of caught up to me, the social aspect at Princeton by my junior year. I was really withdrawn. I think I was depressed. My roommate and I, we drew the worst possible like room draw. So we were in the bottom. So we had just an awful room. I mean, it was this room that the window looked to another dorm. Like we didn't have a view of like this beautiful campus. And it just was like this time that I was just like, ugh. So, I did, and also throughout the entire time I was here, my dad was ill. I think that was always like in my mind. He passed away in December of '93. So, but I wasn't doing that well generally. There was one class that I think I was failing, and I went up to the professor and I said, "Look, what can I do to not get a fail? I need to pass this class." And he told me that I could do nothing. He's like, because it's not going to be fair to the other kids. And now that I think about it, that's so ridiculous. Because, it's not like I was going to, miraculously get an A. Obviously, I wasn't going to, my classmate who was getting the A or whatever, I wasn't going to like kick them out of their possibility of getting into, Harvard Law School or something. It's just silly. Now that I think about it, I think maybe I'm hoping now that professors are a little more understanding, because I actually decided to withdraw. I'm like, I'm not going to have a fail on my transcript, because I have plans, for beyond Princeton, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to get a fail on my transcript. So I ended up withdrawing. I got W's, So I don't know that was a reflection of necessarily of because I was Latina. I don't think so, but it's just silly. Like, it's just small-minded. I think that people have to have a better, understanding of kids today. I mean, then and now, like, there's things that come up sometimes. I was very upfront, what can I do? And he said nothing. He basically said, you're definitely getting a fail, even if I did all the work, which again is not ideal. I'm not saying that I should have therefore gotten an A or even a B, but, give me a shot. So anyway, that's my spiel. That's my grumpiness towards that guy. I've gotten over it mostly.
What was your thesis topic, and how did you find that experience?
My thesis subject, honestly, I cannot remember my topic, but I think it was on Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, who was the first Mexican feminist. And she was a nun in Mexico. She was, back in when she wrote, like, she had to write as if she were a man, otherwise people wouldn't read what she had to say. So it was about the first feminist. How did I arrive at the topic? I think, again, through some of the readings that I had in my Spanish classes. And I remember Professor Meg Greer, she had a class on the golden age, golden era of literature in Spain, and her entire class was of women writers who very feminist, and some of them again wrote as if they had a male name, right? Because they couldn't, no one would take a woman seriously who's a writer. So that was always kind of interest to me, right? How women, and even today, I still think, wow, we have so far to go. Women, we're still, maybe not in this country, but definitely in other countries. But yeah, that how I arrived at it, I don't know. I don't have a specific recollection, but it was just generally my interest in women topics, and then Professor Greer, I think she helped me with that.
What was your social life like at Princeton?
My social life, let's see. I'm just kind of going back to the beginning. At the beginning, I hung out a lot with Alice Rivera, and because I had met her in the summer program, although she was in a different residential college. Just kind of normal. We'd go I guess sometimes to those eating clubs. But then when I was part of the band, I think we ended up doing a lot of things together, or even even practicing was fun, right? And then I also was a member of the gospel choir. That was really cool. Just a lot of the, most of the members of the gospel choir are African American. There's so many amazing musicians and singers. So that was a real treat to be part of that. And then we would have these after every practice, we'd have a prayer circle, and that was also an opportunity to, I mentioned earlier that my dad was sick, and I hope I don't start crying. But yeah, that I did a lot of crying then. But yeah, in terms of fun, I don't know. I socially, Paul would come up from Forbes and come up to Maddie where I was, and we'd go to the street and party a little, or somebody had a dorm party, dancing. Of course, I'm Latina. I like to dance, so wherever there's good dancing, we'd head there. Yeah, I mean, I remember some kids, they would actually go to New York to clubs or something. I never actually did that. I don't know. They were very organized. They made their way all the way up to the city and went to parties. The one time that we were actually gonna head out there, this was in '94 when I graduated. A friend of mine had a car, and then I think there was 5 of us piled in the front, and the cops stopped us, so we never made it. So yeah.
Any other social groups or clubs that you were involved with aside from the eating clubs and
The social groups that I was involved with really was, like I said, the band, the Junta del Son, obviously, and the Junta del Son is the name of the band, and the gospel choir, and Chicano Caucus. I was I think it's called something else now. I believe today the Chicano Caucus and the Acción Puertorriqueña, they're kind of blended together. It's a Latino group. So I was always a member of that. I don't think I ever had a leadership role in it, but those were my people. That's definitely. I did a lot of things with them, just friendship-wise, and also with the group. At one point, I believe Cesar Chavez came to visit because of efforts of other people in the Chicano Caucus, but somehow I ended up in a photograph right next to him. So that was cool. But yeah, and then and then that's also where I realized how different we are, Mexican Americans. I remember talking to this classmate. He was a class of '93. He told me, look, you're the only one here, and I won't say who he is, but that I feel comfortable talking to, because everyone else judges me that I'm to this or to that or to the other. And again, we're young, we're insecure, but like I mentioned earlier, when I first got here, I thought my Spanish was great. And then I just kind of like, that was so wrong. So I think by the time I met this classmate, I realized we're all different, I think he was pretty wealthy. So, there was this disconnect, right, between him and some of the other Mexican Americans who maybe weren't as wealthy. That's how he perceived it. And to be honest, there's probably some truth to it. But I looking back, I got along with just about everybody there in the group, whether you spoke Spanish or didn't speak Spanish. Although I'll add here, in reunions, and I will say her name, Deborah Schaefer. She's my class, and she's Mexican American, right? And I never really hung out with her when we were here as classmates, but now and during reunions, I've met her and I've gotten a chance to talk to her. Gorgeous. Shame on you. No, I'm kidding. That's okay.
Still speeding.
Let's see. Let me get a little water.
Yeah, me too.
That's okay. That's fine. Maybe drink. Chance for some water. What time is it? 12. So,
11:54.
okay. So what should I do? Should I just start talking about Deborah again, or what?
Start with Deborah.
Okay.
Whatever you wanted to share.
Yeah.
With her.
Am I like
Shiny?
shiny?
I
I should
my
put,
eyelashes over here.
huh?
No, it's blown out, but I can. When you turn this way, I
Uh-huh.
can see the shine. We have paper towels. So
Oh crap. Oh well.
Still look good.
Thank you. I asked like when we're almost done.
Let me see.
Um,
Well, we barely see it. Only when you turn this way, you barely turn.
okay, good. Good. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So Deborah. That was the question, was what again?
The question was
About
we were at. I'm like, wait a minute.
we're at.
You're
About other groups that I was involved in.
social activities.
Yeah, social activities, and I started about Chicano caucus, blah, blah, blah. So, can I go or no? So Deborah Schaefer, I've gotten to know her since we graduated. I kind of connected with her at reunions. We were same class. She's from San Antonio. She's Mexican American, but I remember, we didn't hang out. And then even when I met her again recently, it didn't click immediately that she was Latina. And see, we still do that, right? Because her name is Schaefer. And then she kind of shared with me how she felt like a lot of us Mexican Americans who, I think her dad is, I think he's white, who had the Latino surnames, we kind of ignored or looked down upon, those aren't her words, I'm paraphrasing, but the story is how I, my error, that I didn't have, sort of acknowledge her. I just got through telling you how I felt like I got along with everybody, but who knows, right? Because there's some people that I just didn't even realize, were Latino. And obviously the first marker that you look for, at least I did, was a name, right? The Latino Spanish surname, or obviously the way you look. But I was always looking for Latinos on campus because to me, there weren't a lot of us. One of them was Ted Cruz, but I never talked to him. Because they also have to seem like they're inviting, and I just never felt that. Although I will share, by the way, that he was very nice to me. We met in D.C. I lived 5 years in D.C., and I was working at the White House. He was a clerk at the Supreme Court, and I think and I didn't know really anything about Ted Cruz as an undergrad. I know I've heard stories now, but then I just knew, oh, Ted Cruz from Princeton, and he was a clerk, and I didn't go to Harvard Law School, so I knew nothing because that's where he went after Princeton, and he actually gave a tour to my family and me of the Supreme Court, which was pretty cool. But that was my time with Ted Cruz.
Okay. And do you feel like your closest friends in your undergraduate years at Princeton, they were similar backgrounds to you?
My closest friends, they were similar. For example, Andy Bell, I think I had mentioned it earlier. He's white. He's from Bethesda, Maryland, but he was a Spanish major. So obviously we had that in common, right? I loved him. He introduced me to coffee. I think, was it our junior year? Or he realized I never had coffee because I just didn't grow up drinking coffee. And oh my God, you're missing out. And he like had a thing, I think it was like a little French press or something in his room. He's like, you've got to try it. So he's guilty for me now being a coffee person. And then he's also someone who I always think about when I don't have enough reading light, because he would always tell me, you don't have enough reading light. So funny, these things. But yeah, and then the others are like Alice Rivera. She's Puerto Rican, who, by the way, I'd never had met a Puerto Rican in LA, but she and I clicked. Initially, and we always tell this story, initially I thought she was a little bit stuck up. She looked beautiful with her beautiful clothes, but I don't know what it was that we connected. Eventually, and we've been friends. And she promised me she was going to come to she's not here right now. She promised she was going to come to the 35th reunion. At the time that she was a freshman at Princeton, I think she had lived in Haiti for a while and then was back in Puerto Rico, and now she lives in Los Angeles. And we're both married to. I'm married to a Brazilian. He's married to a Spanish man. We don't have kids. It's kind of weird how we have similar, I don't know, lives. But I don't see her that often. She's so busy. Well, we both are, but whatever. But I love her. And then Paul Roldan is another one who I didn't stay in touch with him for a very, very long time. But then, you come to reunions and it's like you had just seen him, like, it's like family, right? And then there's just some, I have to mention my time with my friends from ALPA, the Princeton Alumni Latino, I don't even know what ALPA. I've made so many friends through that organization. It's all the Latino alums. Some of them I went to school with. Ana Cabrera, by the way, she's now on the board of ALPA, Association of Latino Princeton Alumni, that's what it's called. But she and I weren't particularly close at Princeton, just because, not because we had anything against each other, just because, she was, I think, at some other college or whatever. But now through the alumni group, we're close, like we love sparkling wine, and she's in California now as well, which is cool. For a long time she was in Jersey. And then the other person that I had popped into my head is Ricardo de Leon, who is 5 years ahead of me, but he's from South Texas. Also Javier de la Garza, another Princetonian from 5 years, from 87, I believe, or 86. Aida Alvarez, she's class of 77, but these are all people that I met through ALPA, through being in that organization.
I'm just going to interrupt 1 second. So we're talking about the undergraduate years at Princeton.
Okay.
We're going to try to just focus on that. But
yeah.
You know what? So just to
I know.
The question, during the time that you were at your undergraduate.
Do I still have those is that what was the question?
No. Were your closest
my
friends
closest
in your
friend.
undergraduate years
Yeah.
of a similar background?
Yeah.
So just.
Okay. And then in terms of other friends.
I still have a few questions left, I know.
Yeah. Well, okay. So my friends from undergrad, if they had similar backgrounds to me, I've already mentioned Alice, and and Paul and Andy.
So
And
are they of similar backgrounds than you, would you say? Or would you say they're different, or would you
well,
diverse?
like, so for example, with Andy, I think it was our interest in, you know, I guess he was like, he spoke Spanish, right? And but in terms of, no, the background's not really. I mean, he's white and he's from, you know, Bethesda, and but you know, we're just two, you know, nice, warm people who met in Spanish class, and oh, he's still my friend. Now he lives in Argentina. And then Paul wrote down, I believe that probably he and I have the most similar background. He's Puerto Rican Cuban, but from Queens, and I'm from LA. We were both from the inner city, so that's what kind of, that was the link there, right? And because honestly, at the time, a lot of the Mexican American, there were no other Mexican American girls from LA that I remember. So that was a little tough. Amparo was here, but she was ahead of me 2 years. That's a big difference kind of when you're 18, 20. And then Alice, she's Puerto Rican, so she's not a similar background except that we're both Latina, and we both love to dance. But that's not why we became good friends. We just, but and you know, these are the three people that I spent a lot of time with. Alice, my first 2 years at Princeton, she was really my best friend. And again, even though we go through long stretches of time that we don't see each other, you know, it's just like we're back here and we can talk about anything.
Okay. And during the time you were at Princeton, did any major external events affect your experience at Princeton as a Latina, or just in general?
Did any major external events affect my time here as a Latina? I don't remember too much generally. Let's see. I remember I love politics, or I did anyway, and I was actually worked in politics after Princeton. So I remember the first time I voted in '88 was for Dukakis. I've always been a Democrat. But the big external event or thing that was happening was my dad's health. So to me, that affected my entire time here. That was hard.
How did Princeton affect your subsequent life and career?
Princeton, how did it affect my subsequent life and career? So when I graduated, my father had just passed away, so I was a little lost. But I ended up going to Washington. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, because initially, thank you. So I always tell the story of how I ended up in Washington, because after I graduated, my father had just passed away, and my mom, I was like, oh God, I have to go back home. And but it was like I went, and I grew up in housing projects, and my mom was still living in housing projects, and it was like that was not the right move for me, having housing projects, Princeton housing projects. And the story I tell is that I had wanted to get the LA Times delivered where I lived with my mom, and the LA Times wouldn't deliver in the housing projects. So that was like, after I had gotten the New York Times every day in my room, or, just sort of little things like, well, that's not a little thing, but it's sort of a little example of kind of how I felt, and so a friend of mine, not from Princeton, had told me about a opportunity at the White House as an intern. Usually White House interns usually are there, they're younger. At that point I was 24. But to me that was kind of my ticket. The Bill Clinton's speechwriter, Carolyn Curiel, who was the first Mexican-American presidential speechwriter, she was actively seeking Latino interns. And so that's how I ended up there. And from there, and then from there, I eventually worked for Bill Richardson. And when you tell someone you were a Princeton graduate, it sort of makes an impact. So you're saying, how, the question was, how did it sort of impact or have an effect on my career? Definitely opened doors, right? And then, so I'm in DC, I'm a Latina, Mexican American, I went to Princeton. So like it kind of, I mean, that's just how it, now looking back, and even then, how it worked out, it opened doors for me. And I had no plan, I didn't know what I was going to do after the internship. That was 3 months. Eventually, I got a job at the White House Visitor's Office, and then went to work for Bill Richardson, and then Cabinet Affairs. It was a great ride working in DC.
Marsh, do you have anything you want to add before I do the closing question?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the
Oh my God.
projects, because I am familiar with NUTSHEP housing projects, and it just gave me a visual of you in school and what that experience is like and the folks that are there. And then when you come home, what that experience is like after you've been exposed to campus life and the people that you met on campus. How was that like as your experience through college when you would go back home and take with you the campus life back to when you visited family, etc.? How did that feel? Like how did you reconcile all of that?
She's just gonna make me cry. Is that what you want, Mosh? For me to cry?
If you don't feel comfortable answering,
It's okay.
we can.
No, just give me a sec.
Okay.
Because I think,
You're opening up some floodgates over here, Marsha.
Okay. Just presentable.
Great.
And just the spirit behind the question
Mhm.
is there's a lot of folks from different backgrounds that when they leave home, they don't necessarily have the home lifestyle to turn to, so they really feel that they're out there on a limb by themselves.
Yeah.
Those folks, they do come back home, but it's not a reality that they can no longer see themselves inserted in that vision.
Yeah.
And you actually live that. And so
Yeah.
I just would love, because I think it's really authentic. It touches me because I'm somebody that's from that type of experience myself. So that's why I asked that question. The spirit of it really is to inspire
Yeah.
folks to get to a point where you can use that as a platform for you to have more capabilities and diversity in thought because you've come from such an experience. So if you could just give us a little insight there, that'd be great.
So in terms of how my experience, being at Princeton, a student, and then going home, right? Home was housing projects. And on a day-to-day, I don't have a lot of memories about how I felt because I always felt like we weren't going to always be in the housing projects. So I think I was always hopeful. But I already shared about post, when I graduated, how it was a reality that it was very different. So it definitely was a contrast, right? Go home was, but I don't remember it being difficult except for my father being ill. And then necessarily because again, the thing was always moving forward. This is not where we're gonna be. My mom's not gonna live in the housing projects forever. But it came back during the pandemic, where one of my first thoughts was those kids who have to leave campus to go to housing projects or somewhere where it's not Princeton. You know what I mean? Like if you're a kid who has a home that like you have your own room and you can study and everything's great, perfect. But not every kid has that. So those are some of the, because I don't have children, but I have a lot of friends who do, and during the pandemic, I learned, a lot of these upper middle class parents were so worried about their children and how they were going to miss out. But to me, I thought about nobody that I knew today, but it's really about me, really, right? Like those kids to have to go back to, not ideal living situations. So, and then, I mentioned earlier about having to withdraw, and people were like, well, why don't you just go to UC, not just UCLA. UCLA is a great school, but for them, they would kind of frame it that way. And I was like, no, I was always stubborn. I was always like, I am going to graduate from Princeton, I knew it was a great feat to get into Princeton and to not finish. I thought that would be something that I would regret, and I didn't want to have that. But yeah, on the day-to-day, obviously a lot of things, to be honest, the things that I remember more about going home was, for example, going home for the holidays meant going to Mexico, to my mother's village. And again, a lot of the kids around here at Princeton, when I was here, they think, oh, I'm going to go to Cancun, or I'm going to go to some resort. I'm going to this little village that has dirt roads. There's like an outhouse still. At some point they had a bathroom. But these are my first cousins. These are my aunts. This is my mom's family, and that's where I would go for Christmas. And I don't know. Everything's kind of always been part of me. I always live. I don't think that I ever felt like, oh God, this is so different. But because I was living it, right? But again, I think that I never was kind of like depressed being home, because it was just part of the trajectory that I had to go through. That was home then, until I graduated, right? Then I had to leave, and then again, it to me, I think that if you had to do that for a long time, for an extended period of time, like the kids that lived through COVID, that would have been a real lost opportunity for them to have, instead of being here, go to a difficult situation at home, where people don't really understand you. I will say that people from, they can't really understand what Princeton's like. It's different. How can you? You have to go through it, right? And even today, like when, it's 20, 30 years later, and some of our Latino kids are still going through the same things we went. But you know what? I'm not that surprised, because it's a personal experience. You can't, like, even if you share with a kid today, XYZ, learn from me, what happened to me, they have to live it. Thankfully, I think now it's more diverse. But back then, when I would go home, I think people, they would equate maybe like Princeton to like going to ELAC, Like a lot of my family members, they didn't really understand like the difference. ELAC is East LA Community College. To them, that's college, right? And so, it's not like I'm gonna explain to them how it's different. And so those things where I could already feel like there's things that we just I don't have in common with a lot of my family members. Of course, my mom knew. She would just roll her eyes, right? My daughter's going to Princeton, But yeah, those little things. But and just also the physical aspect of it, right? It was not a nice place where I lived. And eventually, I believe it got torn down in 98. So I graduated in 92. By 99, I believe it got torn down. So it doesn't exist anymore. So yeah.
Okay.
I got through that. I don't know if you got what you wanted, Mo.
Oh, you have that last question.
This is just, it's like kind of a fun question.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Louis. Was that bad or what happened?
No, it only started going a little bit. If you look really closely, you can see it. I know what it is, so I just wanted you to hide it a little bit more.
Oh, I thought you meant that you couldn't hear.
No.
Okay.
Can I get your name real quick?
Yeah,
Please?
it's Irma Martinez, IRMA. Martin, easy.
Martinez?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry again about
Don't worry. Give us a shot, a chance to get water.
Are you
Good.
exiting?
What?
Are you leaving?
I'm done.
Okay, yeah, just because I have to ask one more question.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. So you're, what year?
92.
92. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, that's fine.
Also,
92.
photographer.
Huh?
I'm a photographer for the magazine.
Oh, that's. Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, very cool.
Okay, well, look,
Whew.
alright. So what would Irma today tell young Irma? If there's anything you would tell her.
What would Irma today tell young Irma? It's a fun question. To be yourself, instead of hiding. At Roosevelt, my high school, I was voted best personality, But here, when I got here, I was invisible for a while, just be yourself, and I was curious and joyful, but also I let this place get to me, so, and be curious, and just keep moving forward and talk to the white guy or girl that you were afraid to talk to. Honestly, I was back then, and there were plenty of white classmates that were Eden, forgetting her last name, beautiful and amazing. But there were others that, back then I just wouldn't talk to, which is dumb, but so just be curious, joyful, friendly, and study a lot more too, definitely. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Thank